Welcome to the Outer Realm with Michelle DeRoche and Amelia Pisano. Airing live on the United Public Radio Network, 105.3 FM in New Orleans.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Thursday night segment of The Outer Realm. We are broadcasting live on the United Public Radio Network, UFO Paranormal Radio Network, 105.3 from the Gulf Coast and 107.7 from New Orleans. We are fully sponsored by the amazing people over at Folgers Coffee, who have been a part of our journey since the beginning. I would say, what, Bubbles, 4 years?
2020.
Yeah.
2020.
4
years, exactly.
On 4 years.
Yep.
There we go.
Lockdown.
I know. Also, big thank you to Dr. Stick, the sonic surgeon, aka Justin Snicker, for his contribution of his music and his voice for the intro that you just heard. He's an award-winning composer of Halloween, horror, sci-fi, and dark wave electronic music, which can be found on all of your streaming platforms. Big thank you also to Steve McGinnis, the artist behind all of the banners and logos here at the show. Find him on Facebook and Instagram. Okay, tonight, something like totally out of the norm for us, but right up like Amelia's alley, since, Amelia
I thought you were going to say something else.
She's worked in crime, so I'm like,
Right
this
up
one's for
Oz,
you.
all I
Amelia.
heard.
I know, because I'm just one of those sort of newbies that I completely get, who doesn't know about JFK, but I mean,
yeah, but who knows all of the theories behind the assassination? So I don't.
I know. Gonna go and I'm going to be like, yeah, it's going to be totally
quite a few, and I'm quite interested in it because I'm all about a good cover up in the criminal field. So yeah, I think this one's fantastic.
It'll be for the first time, probably like in a really long time, where I just kind of get more laid back and just enjoy the ride.
No, we're going to keep Michelle involved because this touches on everything. And I'll give you an interesting little fact that has nothing to do with JFK, but with the son of Sam, serial killer. David Berkowitz, he used to say that the devil made him do it. He went to the Exorcist film and felt like he could see Michelle's on. She's ready.
Well, she already knows that. It's not like I
used it because he wanted to be distinguished differently from other serial killers, but he didn't actually believe what he was saying.
No, and he wasn't the only one. There were actually a few that tried to pull that card.
Yeah, but this man killed a lot of people.
I know. So tonight, Jack Roth is going to be joining us for the very first time, and I'm hoping we're going to get him on again because he's just done some amazing films. I know I've seen them all, so I'm going to be a bit of a nerd with all of this, but the Stan Romanek Story, I'm like, okay, definitely have seen that. And it's the Extraordinary series, by the way. The Seeding, yep, seen it. Revelations, yep, seen it. So I'm a big nerd.
I have to watch all of these.
But tonight we take a more serious edge. So his book, Killing Kennedy, exposing the plot, the cover-up, and the consequences. And I am actually really looking forward to this because it's definitely something out of the norm for us. So without further ado, Jack Roth, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. Did you give me all fans?
Wow.
How are you?
Up to here. Good. I'm doing great. Thanks really so much for having me on.
Oh my gosh. Thanks for writing this. You have no idea how excited I was when Michelle told me, I'm like, this is a gift for me.
It is.
This is a gift.
I messaged her and I said, okay. We nicknamed her Bubbles, so here she's going to be all serious. But anyway, it's like, okay, you're sitting down because it's like, I got your present.
Yeah, I got you.
Amelia, I'll send you a signed copy. How's that?
I'm gonna cry.
There we go.
Thank you.
There we go. There we go.
I've never met anyone because being Canadian, I don't know who has the same thoughts and feelings that I do regarding the assassination. I think there's a lot of knowledge that is messed up and missed over the years. And I don't want to talk too much. I want you to be able to just come in and tell us how you started it and when this came to you that I've got to put this down on paper. I have to put the story out.
Seriously, because, you know, Jack, looking at everything else you've done, it was just almost blindsided me when I saw this book. I'm like, okay, wait a minute. This is
She's like, wait, can he come back? I go, if he likes us.
No, we're definitely going to do this again.
I'm already loving this, so I'm good.
Is Jack, and you wrote about John Kenny. Oh my God. Anyways,
take it away. Yeah,
I'm going to breathe now. I've never done this before in my life, fangirl. This is not me. So yeah. Anyways,
Well, I hope I don't disappoint.
No, absolutely not.
It's interesting knowing that with the films I've done and, you know, doing the documentary work, but I've always been fascinated with the Kennedy assassination. I think from the time I was a kid, a little context, I was born in 1965, so I missed the assassination by a couple of years. But I think I think
missed
that
it by a long shot, but whatever.
So I show my age, but it's important to say that because I did grow up during the aftermath of it, or what I call the aftermath of it, which was, you know, obviously Martin Luther King assassination, RFK assassination, the counterculture movement, the Vietnam War, Nixon, Watergate. It was like this erosion. This total erosion of what was known as American exceptionalism in the 50s and the early 60s. So, but what I've always been a critical thinker, and I never have trusted, like some generations I think before us may have trusted institutions that they grew up with, and I've never have. And maybe it's a Gen X thing, I don't know, but I just don't take things at face value. So, but one of the things that I remember being maybe 11, 12 years old and knowing enough now at that age to get a handle on my own perspective on the assassination. And the thing that always really bothered me was the fact that Jack Ruby was able to come into that police station and just shoot Oswald in the stomach and kill him. No idea. But before Oswald had a chance to go to trial.
And why?
And think about it, because to me, Oswald was already saying, I'm a patsy. He was, and what I found out about Lee Harvey Oswald, and we'll get to this, was one of the most incredible parts of this journey for me, that I was able to verify some things and really gain a better understanding of who he really was as a person. But so that always bugged me. And then, of course, in 1991, I think for a lot of people, the movie JFK comes out. Oliver Stone does a phenomenal job of just throwing everything on the wall, right? And
as he always does.
As he always does.
Right.
He's brilliant. And he actually liked my book, which meant the world to me. I had sent him a copy. He actually read it and liked it. So that was a really incredible moment for me. But so I was always interested, and then I started doing a ton of research. And when you think about it, though, Michelle, like you think about the documentaries I do, it's all about really unsolved mysteries. It's about the truth. It's about trying to get to the truth on things that are kind of that bug you, right? That it's like there's something wrong here. Something's rotten in the state of Denmark. We kind of know it is, but the government's not telling us the truth. It's the same for UFO disclosure. It's the same thing.
True.
So, but the Kennedy, I just, of course, again, has always been interested. So what happened was right when COVID started, which was actually good timing from the standpoint that, we're all going to be inside for a long time. And for me, that's fine. I'm a writer. And then, all the interviews I did was face to face on like, whether it's Skype or whatever it was, Google. But I sat with people, even not in front of them, but we would face to face, if you will. And what wound up happening is I had a good friend of mine, and he's a hell of a writer in his own right. He lives in England, and his name is Miguel. And we were talking about this because he's into the same stuff. And we're like, we sit there and again, having this try to have this objective conversation about the Kennedy assassination. And he said, Jack, if you want to write a book, what would be different about this book than the thousands of other books that have already been written on this topic. And it gave me pause. It made me realize, you're right. I can't just, what am I going to do? There have been people that have been researching this for 50 years, literally. And
60.
60 when it happened. And there are some people who were alive who started doing it back then. So I said, you know what? We started throwing around ideas and concepts, and this idea of why it still matters kept coming up. And the idea of these perpetual ripple effects, that there have been ripple effects since then that are still affecting us today, and it does still matter. So for younger generations, they need to know, because nothing's ever been the same since that day. Since the day Kennedy was killed, everything has changed, and not for the better. So that's where it started. And then one interview led to another. I definitely wanted to, I did it in an interview format where every chapter is a person that I interviewed. And the way I set the book up was to have different sections. Like one section, for example, is my father was in the CIA. And that section is all people whose father was literally in the CIA during that time.
Oh.
So yeah, and that was, you know, again, fascinating. I mean, the things I learned, and just the emotional impact of the interviews too. It was very emotional for everyone. There were two little girls. That's another part of the book. There were two little girls who were in Dallas that day. One was in Dealey Plaza. The other's grandmother owned the boarding house that Oswald stayed in.
Oh wow!
So there was I got really good interviews, and I try to give these. I wanted the people in the book to do the talking, and I was just going to present it in a very compelling, readable way. And again, I do give conclusions based on everything I learned, but to me, it was more of people's history. And there are a lot of conclusions that you can come through to based on all these interviews I did. I did 24 interviews that are in the book, and it just turned out really well. I mean, I've been really so happy with the feedback that I've gotten and from everyone, and I appreciate it. But I wanted to do my own small part in adding to the literature of the Kennedy assassination in a way that would make people think, to not just accept the official narrative all the time, because most of the time officials, they're simply going to lie to you, because that's what governments basically do. There's a lot of history in this. It's not just the Kennedy assassination, right? This goes back to the beginning of civilizations, human civilizations. This is the way things are. So there's corruption, there's cover up, there's conspiracy. This is human nature, and that's part of the book as well.
Everyone loves a mystery.
I love what you put. Yeah, the contribution that you made is I think it would be hard pressed to find in any other literature, because I don't know of anyone who has interviewed the boarding house where Oswald stayed.
Well, and again, so you have the grandmother, this woman's grandmother, and so she was a kid. But to give you an example, okay, this is a perfect example. So we asked, well, who was Lee Harvey Oswald really?
Yes.
Right. And one of my main goals of the book was to give a perspective on Oswald, a more human's perspective on him, that wasn't just either a patsy or a lone nut, because that's the only way people think of him, one or the other. But we're dealing with a human being. He was a real person, right? He had a wife and two kids. When he died, his children were very young, two girls who are alive today, who still have to live with that stigma.
That's right.
So I wanted to get it to the more personal aspects of this. Who was this man?
And why did they choose him?
And what happened that he was put in this position in the first place? And so this woman, who was, her grandmother owned the boarding house, so she would meet a lot of people who stayed at the boarding house, and men usually who stayed there for a specific amount of time for whatever, and then went their own way. And what she said about Oswald that stood out to her was, like, of all the people that stayed there, most of the men that they're there, they're doing whatever they're doing. They did not want to deal with kids. It was her and she had 2 brothers, and they were all young, and most of them didn't want to give them the time of day. But Lee Harvey Oswald did. He would, when he had spare time, he would go out and play catch with the brothers. He would play with them. He would talk to them. And one time, this girl had dyslexia. So her grandmother was at the kitchen table. They were doing their homework, and she was having a real hard time. And back then, they didn't know what this was. So it was frustrating. The grandmother's like, why can't you get this? And Lee Harvey Oswald passed by her and whispered in her ear, don't ever give up. Because he was dyslexic. And he worked through it, and he became an avid reader. He was an extremely intelligent, well-read man. And he was also a patriot. And he was part of the U.S. intelligence community. And that's what people don't realize. He worked for the CIA, that he was really good at spycraft, and he followed his orders. That is what got him in this situation. Yeah. But this is amazing story. So one time Lee Harvey Oswald, so he was sitting on the front steps, front porch, if you will. And the 2 brothers were playing wrestling, and they got into a real fight. And the sister, this woman, was by the door at the time. So Lee went out, separated them, brought them back to the porch, sat him down, and said, you guys have to understand something. You're brothers, and you must always protect each other. You cannot fight with each other. You're brothers. And so you always know that. Don't fight with each other. And this girl's standing there like, God, I can't believe he's even caring. Because back then most adults were like, well, children are to be seen and not heard.
That's true.
It was a mentality. It was the early 60s. It was really, that's the way it was.
Right.
So for Oswald to be that, he cared about these kids. He loved kids. He had 2 daughters of his own. So he wasn't this crazy lunatic lone assassin nut job that the media and the Warren Commission made him out to be. And there's more to it. There's a lot more in the book about it, but that was one of the things that was very satisfying to me, is that I actually learned so much about who Lee Harvey Oswald was and what his role, and when I say what his role was in it, is that he really didn't have a role in it. He was definitely set up. Now he was there. He knew he was part of U.S. intelligence, so he was told to be there, and he was doing what he was doing. He was basically infiltrating far right Cuban exile community groups that were actually a threat to Kennedy. So he thought for longest time that he was helping protect Kennedy. And then he found out at some point, we're not sure exactly when, that he was being set up as a patsy, which is when he made the final phone call he made to his girlfriend at the time, who was having an affair with her. This is all New Orleans related, the summer before. Wow. And I interviewed her. And what she said is that Lee said, because she's like, meet me in Mexico, just run away, get away. We'll meet somewhere. And he said, I can't, because if I am not where I'm supposed to be, they're going to kill my wife and kids.
Oh, boy.
And so he was like, I have to see this through. And this is what he said. He said, and besides, if I stay, there'll be one less gun pointed at Kennedy.
Wow. Wow.
I need time to absorb that. Because it's not what you normally hear, right?
That's
you
a
hear
humdinger. Yeah, that's a big deal.
It very much is, because you hear the story of in the documentaries, on the television specials, you hear the story that he was met at the doorway and he was just dismissed because the management said, oh, he's an employee here. And he was dismissed and then later arrested at a movie theater because he didn't pay an admission fee. And then he punched the cop and was arrested. And I said to Michelle, I got to wonder, why would you punch a police officer unless you need protection or you need to
be found.
Yes.
Well, check this out. Oswald realizes that day he's at the book depository. He's not on the 6th floor. There are other assassins on the 6th floor. He's not there. So he's either down on the front, in the front, like there's that photo that people, you know, again, trying to confirm that's tough because it's blurry, but it does look like Oswald. But he realizes he's smart and he knows now he's in trouble. So what does he do? He goes home, he gets his gun. That's when he runs into Tippit, Officer Tippit. Well, they said there were people there and that they say Oswald killed Tippit, but Oswald didn't kill Tippit. It was someone else who killed Tippit. And here's the thing. What does Oswald do, like any good operative would do in a situation like that? He calls his handler, CIA handler. What does the CIA handler tell him to do? Go to the Texas Theater, we'll pick you up, we'll get you out of town. So he goes to the Texas Theater. And the next thing you know, whether he paid for the ticket or not, 40 or 50 Dallas police officers are at the Texas Theater. And he knows, okay, I'm definitely the patsy. So basically they set him up to go to the Texas Theater so they could get him there. They don't charge him with the shooting of the president. They charge him with the Tippit shooting. They bring him in. He's not allowed to talk to an attorney. He's like, what? And you saw the interview with him while he was there. He's like, I'm a patsy. I have no idea what's going on. I haven't been given legal representation. He knew exactly what was happening. So the people responsible, and we can get into that, but they see this and they realize Oswald cannot see the inside of a courtroom. We can't have him talk. I think that they thought he would either be killed in the Tippit incident or at the theater, but he didn't. He wasn't. So who do they bring in? Jack Ruby, mobster, up to his eyeballs, right? And the mob is in on this. They're not the main, they assisted.
There's a lot of factors in it.
There's
right?
so
There's
many.
There's a lot of factors, a lot of puzzle pieces.
And it's convoluted on purpose. There's misinformation on purpose. It's confusing on purpose. And that's the way that CIA operated at the time. This is the way they went into other countries and did coups and stole elections and did all the things they weren't supposed to be doing, but they were doing it. So they just basically took what they were doing on the outside, and they used to work with the mob. They would hire the mob to do hits because the mob was really good at that.
No, it's not the first time.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. So you start putting all these pieces together, and then you realize, now listen, in the end, people ask me, who did it? And I'm like, well, I don't know who was behind the grassy knoll. We'll probably never know that because there's been so much, right, that has come out since, and it's all confusion and misinformation and misdirection.
For a reason.
So,
I wonder too if he ever even revealed that he was on the grassy knoll or the gentleman behind the fence. I mean, we have a picture of a hat, but that's all we have. But I mean, that's not something that you would be telling your grandkids at Thanksgiving. Right.
No,
so,
and the amazing thing about it is these people still today are terrified to talk about it because they know what the people who did it are capable of.
Well, then they did their job. No one will ever talk about it until it runs out of generations.
They succeeded in their coup d'etat. And that's what I tell people.
Well said.
And that's sad.
Daniel.
It's very, very sad. And that's why I felt like I needed to write the book, because regardless of what we know in the end, we know there's something was wrong. Something wasn't right. The Warren Commission report was nonsense. The magic bullet theory was utter nonsense. The Jack Ruby killing Oswald should have been the biggest red flag of all. And one of the things I learned, which is interesting, in the United States, we kind of bought into what the government was telling us. We couldn't believe that our government would do such a thing. But in Europe, in the European papers, because remember, they're much older countries, right? And they've been through this a billion times with their governments. And they're like, they did it. They couldn't believe. They laughed at us because we were believing what our government was telling us. They're like, wait, you don't see the red flags here? The Americans we were like 4-year-olds, literally 4-year-olds who's like, oh, that's our government. They wouldn't do that to us.
It's hard because it depends on what generation you're asking. Gen X, I was born in 1969. We will pin you down and say you're guilty before we even look into who you are. We'll condemn you first. That's just our nature. But I think the generation before us and perhaps after us, looks at it a little bit differently. But it's hard to believe, like you said, that your government was responsible for killing one of the most beloved presidents you've ever had in your history of America. And how and why would they want to? That's my question, regardless of who was involved, how many shots were heard, how someone can distinguish, a handgun from a shotgun, a rifle, and so on. The one question still remains, why?
And again, that's the most important question. What's the motive?
Yeah.
And I go back to what I tell people, and it's a safe answer because, again, I wasn't there. I wasn't behind the grassy knoll. I wasn't on the 6th floor of the pod. I didn't see who was there. I wasn't in some backdoor meeting where they decided to do this. And who was that, right? Who were the powerful men who really made that decision? But what we see and what we kind of know is that, so you have Kennedy. John F. Kennedy was not supposed to win the election in 1960. Nixon was supposed to win that election. And here comes this upstart Kennedy. And they may very well, with his father, yes, with his father and his union connections, they might have stole the election in Chicago and Illinois.
Well, his father was a criminal.
He was a bootlegger.
He was a gangster.
Yeah, it's a bootlegger. Yeah. And so here are these upstart Kennedys. Well, what do you have going on in 1960? So, and this is what I tell people. Who killed Kennedy? It was the Cold War and the times in which he governed that ultimately killed JFK. And what I mean by that is the Cold Warriors. And who are we dealing with when we say Cold Warriors? Allen Dulles, the Allen Dulleses of the world, right? The James Angletons of the world, the CIA people who were, they were part of the OSS before it was the CIA, and they had this, their biggest enemy to them was Soviet Union. It was communism. It wasn't the Nazis. We defeated the Nazis in World War II, but Allen Dulles and the CIA helped tens of thousands of Nazis escape Europe. It's Project Paperclip, and it wasn't just the scientists. It wasn't just Werner von Braun with the rocket program. It was MK. We're talking about like MK Ultra.
That's right.
Mind control. They were doing this in the concentration camps. A lot of these old school American blue blood elitists, and in the end, that's what we're talking about. Blue blood elitists with a lot of power. Their grandfathers and great grandfathers were the original robber barons. So they looked down on Kennedy's father for being a bootlegger, but their families made their money in just as crooked, if not more crooked ways.
Yeah, but theirs was older.
It was much older, and they were from, again, these blue blood. Yeah. I use the WASPy. You don't hear that much anymore, but it's white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. Well, guess what? People ask me, well, Kennedy went to Harvard. He was privileged. And they were wealthy because the father made a ton of money. They were very well educated. They were Catholic. And to these guys, to these blue blood elitists, that they might as well have been the devil. I mean, they were having none of it. Okay. They weren't of the same quote unquote class and breed as these guys were, as these other families were. Because in the end, we are talking about families.
Yes.
Okay. So they've run the country since the 1800s, since the robber barons. These are the same guys who built the railroads, right? The same guys who owned the banks, the same guys who eventually Henry Ford, right? All these guys. And a lot of them, what they had in common, you read this is true. They were all anti-Semitic. They were all fascist a little bit in their way of thinking. They hated everyone that wasn't them. And they grow up generation after generation with this elitist mindset of we're better than everyone else.
We're kind of living under that now.
And we are living under that now. Yeah. Well, there's no question we are. And that's because in 1963, I think they galvanized their strength. And they sent a very powerful message to anyone who would dare go against them.
Not untouchable.
And Kennedy got in the office. There was a little hubris there. There was ego there with John F. Kennedy and Robert, he's this attorney general. But we have power. But presidents really don't have power in this country. Eisenhower tried to warn Kennedy of that.
Many leaders don't, especially if you're in a democracy or parliament. You're not going to have power. You have a cabinet.
Government.
You don't have power.
And when you think about what Kennedy tried to do, what did he want to do? He wanted to change some things that were just unacceptable to these people. First of all, he wanted to get rid of the CIA because the CIA had lied to him in the Bay of Pigs. They tried to manipulate him like they did Eisenhower. And Kennedy was like, I'm not giving you air support. So what happens, Kennedy takes the blame publicly, but behind closed doors, he's furious with the CIA. He fires Allen Dulles. This is a Cold Warrior, sacred cow of the Cold War, Allen Dulles. He fires him. That was the first, well, maybe the first or second nail in his coffin, right? So you have that going on. Then what happens the next year in 1962? Cuban Missile Crisis. This is when Kennedy realizes that tens of millions of Americans can die at a blink of an eye.
40 million.
Yeah, and he starts to communicate backdoor with Khrushchev, backdoor channels to say, we need détente. We need to back off on this. We need to work together a little bit. And that's where you hear the things like the Joint Space Program. And he was working with Khrushchev because he also realized this is ridiculous. This is a fool's errand. Millions of people are going to die. But the Cold Warriors in the United States, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, people like Curtis LeMay, again, Allen Dulles, all these guys, right? They don't care about collateral damage. If 10 million Americans die, again, they're peasants.
There's still 300 million left. It's a military outlook, though.
As long as we survive, because we're the elite. Who cares? We get rid of some of it. It's probably a good thing. We thin the herd a little bit.
Right.
This is how these people think. And that's what people don't realize is like, you have to understand the mentality in order to understand why and how it happened.
I didn't know anything about him firing the CIA. That is phenomenal.
He realized what he was up against, and boy, I tell you. And if you look at Kennedy's presidency from 60 to 63, he changed a lot as a person. He grew as a person. I tell people this all the time. The Kennedys were not perfect people. Obviously, they were not. And JFK was probably the biggest womanizer maybe who ever walked the face of the earth. And he had a real issue with that.
He had some competition with Sinatra. I think there was a competition there. Yeah.
Without question. Yeah. They like the same women. So but what do you have? You have a guy who realizes he has courage. We know this because of Profiles in Courage. He was a hero in World War II. He truly did have courage.
He did. And he also had courage with the mob by dating the mistress of a big mobster.
Here's the thing about him. He cared about the American people in America. And he saw what was happening and he thought he could change it. And people ask me, because I get into this and I've talked to some people who say, well, they knew that there was a possibility that they would try to kill him. So did he have this conversation with Robert, right? And say, but well, they won't do that. I think in the end, Kennedy thought they would never do such a thing. They don't have the gall to do that. Well, they did it. And they did have the gall. And they got away with it thanks to the mainstream media that they owned, thanks to the Warren Commission, which was a farce. Guess who was on the Warren Commission? Allen Dulles.
Yes.
And then they
him
come out
and
with
Chief Justice Warren were just a team.
And the magic bullet theory that Arlen Specter came up with, who was a government shill, was the most ridiculous theory that was ever posited in the history of theories in human history.
Is that the one where it takes out 7 wounds with one bullet?
If there's more than 3 bullets, then they have a problem, the Warren Commission, because there's a Zapruder film. So they know if there's more than 3 bullets, there's a conspiracy, because the guy, Oswald, couldn't get more than 3 shots off in that time period, blah, blah, blah.
Even less.
There's no way. And experts couldn't do the shooting up on the 6th floor. So so you have this, they have to prove it was just 3 bullets. So 2 were accounted for. So this third one had to do 50 different things. So that's basically the magic bullet theory. This one bullet did all these things, caused all these injuries. Oh, and by the way, wound up being found on the side of a gurney in the hospital in pristine
condition. That one just threw me. I'm like, wow, things would be so different now. They would never find that bullet nowadays. That would be gone, long gone. And it would never have been a question.
Able to pull it off.
No.
You know, even if they had that CIA guy or some guy, the Secret Service, some guy put that bullet there, just, oh, there's the bullet. The problem is too much technology now. There's too many cameras.
Absolutely.
The thing that almost, the thing that almost really got them in trouble was the Zapruder film. So this guy with an 8mm camera, which was the technology of the day for people, he was all excited about his new camera. And he filmed it, right?
Yes.
You know, but today there'd be everyone in Dealey Plaza would have a camera. So they could never do it that way.
They'd be analyzing that stuff for years. They'd still be analyzing it now if they had that then. Do you talk about the frame switch?
I've talked to people about that. It's a tough one. I know the Zapruder film most likely was doctored because apparently the original Zapruder film, which was sold to Time magazine, which again, if you create the path there and know who was in charge of Time magazine, it was all part of the mainstream media cover-up. So they had to mess with it a little bit because apparently the original Zapruder film clearly shows Kennedy being shot here. And all the doctors at the hospital, when he came in, they all pointed. They say, here was the death injury. This was the death blow. The bullet there was right here. Oswald had to be from back here. So they had to figure out, well, that can't be from here because here's the grassy knoll. The grassy knoll is right there. That's where that's where the fatal shot was fired, was from the grassy knoll. But they couldn't they had to cover that up. So there's so much. And then there are people today still who are like, oh no, Oswald did it. You know, and I'm like, well, why do you say that?
I think it's easier for them. Some people just don't want to do the work or the, or
conditioning too, though.
Yeah, absolutely.
You hear something so many times, people start to believe it. I mean, we've seen that in recent times. We see it in the news all the time. Media is going to be faithful to whoever is funding it. And if it's privately owned, they're going to do what they're told.
What they didn't count on? Sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, I was going to say what they didn't count on. They weren't supposed to duplicate that film, but someone did. Right. And that's what they weren't counting on. And that's when everything started to roll all over again.
Yeah, that was almost a big slip up right there.
That guy would have been in jail if he did that now. He'd be in prison. Because that never would have been sold because it would have been counted as criminal evidence. It never would have been released.
Well, so much there was when you talk about a criminal case and the way they handled everything, it was a joke. So I mean, they washed the limousine. There was a crime scene, and they washed.
And they let people put roses in
and
the seats.
Well, yeah, and we didn't want Jackie to go through that, and that's what Ruby's excuse was. I didn't want Jackie to have to go through a trial. He didn't give a.
She doesn't care about Jackie.
Rat's potato about Jackie Kennedy.
Jackie's dad was crooked too.
Well, listen, again, you're talking about very privileged people.
Yeah.
But the lesson here, and that's the thing in the book that I try to say, is that, listen, we'll never know all of it at this point. Too much time has passed. But we do know, we should know, and we shouldn't believe what's been told to us because that is definitely not the truth. And we can't take things at face value. And if we really want to live in a democratic, free society, we have to realize that governments are governments, whether it's our government, the Chinese government, the South African government, or the Australian government. They are there to maintain their power and control, and everything gets corrupted. Everything gets, it's just nothing is a perfect. If you look at, say, a democracy or socialism, or you look at these in its purest form, the way it was written in its purest form, they sound phenomenal. But when you actually put them into practice with human beings, the problem is human beings. And I try to tell people this all the time. We are very flawed. We're flawed. And as much as a lot of us try to do good and try to search for the truth and try to do good things in our lifetime, especially power hungry people are horrible people. And a lot of times they're literally like psychologically insane.
Well,
literally.
most billionaires tend to have sociopathic tendencies. It comes with their IQ. It doesn't mean they'll kill someone, but when you profile them, it does come with their IQ, just like narcissism has a big part of it. But what people have to understand when they say, oh, but these people are billions and billions and billions of dollars in, yes, but there's nothing left to buy now. What do they need? They seek power. Some will seek to torture their own people. Some will seek genocide. It's a way of fueling that ego and that narcissism. There's so much more to it than just making a buck. When you own everything and you could buy anything, now what? Some people build electric cars and some people,
money. Right.
Yeah, some people build electric cars and some people buy banks.
Exactly.
Rothschild. But it's you have to look at it that way. I think for me, it doesn't matter who did it. And when I say why, I know there's a million reasons that they could have taken him out. And I just find it fascinating at how they pulled it off and how sloppy that was. That looked really bad on the US because this is your president. This was allowed to happen. And I think that's where people want to blame Oswald. Right? They want to blame him because he's not one of them, kind of thing. And
there's something that I interview some psychologists in the book because I wanted to get a perspective, the psychological perspective, the sociological perspective, because it's important. But when you look at the why people in this country especially accepted what they were being told, there's something known as cognitive dissonance. And like you said earlier, it's easier to think that the lone nut communist Oswald did it than to actually consider that our government did it or elite Kabbalist group in our government did it.
Yeah.
It's too much to bear because it's like, well, government's supposed to be like mother and father. They're supposed to nurture us. This is what we're taught, right? It's like, oh, it's for more kids. And the truth is that's the furthest thing from the truth. But there's a lot of people, if you're a World War II veteran and hero and Kennedy is killed, do you really you're going to be like, oh, the communists did it. I can deal with that. Jack Ruby just wanted to kill him because he didn't want Jackie to go through they believe that because it's so much easier. And it's a real thing. It's a psychological thing called cognitive dissonance. And there's all these other psychological factors that are involved in why, and they know if anyone knows psychology of human beings, it's the intelligence community. You see the CIA with MK Ultra, they've been trying to control people and the Nazis did it. And this has been going on forever.
So, not just trying, they have.
Because it's propaganda and propaganda works on a society, especially if they're uninformed or they're not educated the way they should be, or they're not taught critical thinking skills. Our kids aren't taught critical thinking skills. They have to learn it on their own or have parents like me who tell my son, have critical thinking skills, because it's like us. We say, well, definitely you have to have critical thinking, but they don't want an intelligent mass of people in there. They don't want that. They don't want those citizens because we'll challenge them at every turn. But the fact of the matter is that 90% of people just go with the flow. They don't want to deal with it. They don't want to deal with it. And they know that's why they know they could get away with it. And plus a big part of that, again, they control the media. So they control the message. They had to control the message. And they did that as best they could. And they were able to get away with it. So that's
even then they controlled the media, but yet people have so much trouble believing they still do.
Oh, yeah. The media is totally, I think the media, honestly, and you can look this up. I tell people, I think it's controlled. Almost everything in this country is run by 3 companies. If you follow
the money,
follow the money, but also, who owns NBC? Well, who owns Disney? Well, who owns, then you finally get to the Blackwaters or whatever they're called. I have to do more research on this, but there are 3 companies that basically own everything. And that's not a democracy. That's an oligarchy.
Yes.
And they're controlling the message. So in the next, and once you see it, it's really weird. Once you see it, you can never go back. All of a sudden you're like, the news is nonsense. And you actually see what they're doing. And you're like, wait a minute. So it's fear, 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 fear. You think about the things
you're casting stone at their glass houses that they don't want to not feel safe. They don't want to think that everything is a lie.
Divide and conquer.
Yeah.
Look at our two-party system now. We're at each other's throats.
Yeah.
I tell people this all the time because sometimes they'll try to get me to go politically on it. And I'm like, this has nothing to do with Democrat or Republican.
Mm-hmm.
This has to do with divide and conquer. And it's an elite group of people who are laughing hysterically, thinking that the president and Congress actually matter. That's window dressing.
I think people have to take it less personally as well. I think you need to look at it as a business sense right now, especially after the economy crashing the way it did after everything. And everybody's struggling worldwide. They're struggling. Mm. I think you really need to, you've got a country that's going into election. We do the following year. Italy just had theirs. Thank God they brought someone in with smarts and power. She's mighty fierce for a little person. Like she's short like me. So, I think people have to stop looking at the personalities and look at what is being done and who's the best person for that position, who can best stand up to the other side, not just lead.
And I tell people this though too. Don't we have to look at morality a little bit? Don't we? It should matter that we care. Mm-hmm. It should matter that we care about other human beings. It should matter that we're good people. It should matter that we try to do the right thing every day instead of the wrong thing every day. So if there's politicians, because of the way our system's set up, it's all about money. So it's who's donating, right? There's money in politics. So by the time they get to their office, whatever office that might be, they're bought and sold a million times over.
I think so too, because I always say they go in as good people and they come out as politicians.
Correct. And they come out a lot wealthier. And there's the few that are different. And those are the ones that usually get shot in the head.
And we haven't seen an attempted assassination since Reagan in the United States, correct?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that was Reagan was the last attempted one. Yeah, because Ford was that was Squeaky Fromme trying to kill Gerald Ford. And so Reagan. Yeah, Reagan. I'm shocked at that actually. But you know what?
Well, it had nothing to do with politics. It had everything to do with Jodie Foster.
Well, or so we think, right? So again, what's the mind control element here that we're talking about? Do you ever I find this funny, and this is not something that I'm putting out there as a fact. It's something that's whatever, but I just find it interesting that all these assassins of important people all have three names, not two, three names. Think about it.
Wow.
John Wilkes Booth, Lee Harvey Oswald.
That's a different conspiracy.
It's like, why would we have to know their middle name? What is that? And
just in case you confuse them with the other Lee Oswald on the street.
I'm thinking, well, yeah, Lee Harvey Oswald as opposed to Lee.
It sounds better.
But there could be a psychological element to that we're not even aware of.
Well, if you go into behavior analysis and you got to go back to childhood, that's a whole other conversation there. That's something I do a lot of. That's something that, that's a whole other show.
If you understand humanity, if you understand human nature and you understand history, I think you can you have a better grasp of why things were the way they were, are the way they are, and could be the way they could be.
That's why I say don't take it personally.
You have to learn from it.
Yeah.
You have to learn from the things and understand that human nature plays a big part in it. And unless we evolve, like really evolve, I'm talking about metaphysically evolve.
That's right.
Okay.
Oh,
and become truly at a higher vibrational level. And we stop thinking that money is the king of everything. All right. Until we get rid of that 3D way of thinking where our ego controls
That's tough
everything we
for
do.
a lot of people.
No shoes. Yeah.
And we have to get past that.
Absolutely.
And until we get past that, we're always going to have major corruption at all levels of government, from local to national, and then from beyond these international organizations.
Mm-hmm.
Look at FIFA. That with this. I don't know if you're familiar with soccer, but they had.
I'm Italian.
Yeah, I am too, by the way. I don't have an Italian last name, but I am Italian.
No, I have a really Italian last name.
So I love soccer. And when they awarded, what was it? The Arab country was in the summer, and it was like 130 degrees.
Yeah.
And it was like, how could they award them the World Cup? It was all, and it came out, it was all fraudulent. It was all a take. They were all on the take. They all lined their pockets. I think some went to jail.
Because you wouldn't be able to play in that weather anywhere else.
People were dying building the stadiums because it was so hot. They changed it to the winter, but they were building them in the summer, and people were dying. Do you think they cared?
No. Care about the almighty dollar. Right. I think getting back to what you were saying, as far as enlightening and becoming, like, raising your awareness, I think it comes down to a consciousness thing. As long as people have fear, then it's going to be a lot harder to get them to that point. And I believe the powers that be are well aware of that, hence why they keep the people fearful. I think Kennedy was one example of showing them that no one is untouchable. I like the fact that you made Oswald a bit more human in this whole process, because he seems to, have been lost in there. I think people have just directed so much anger towards him that they didn't stop to think, amid all of these conspiracy theories, that maybe this guy really had no choice. You start threatening your family, that makes it really, really difficult.
Yeah.
People have done more to other people for a lot less than that. So I like that aspect of it. Guilty or not, the fact remains is we don't all start out that way. What happens in the middle?
We're compromised. And then once we're compromised, you got to do certain things, or you have to be where you're supposed to be. I talked to other intelligence operatives, the children of, who were there. One woman whose father was in Dealey Plaza that day, and he used to do photography. He was in the Naval Intelligence and in the CIA. And he said, Oswald was on my team that day. We were supposed to be taking photographs of Dealey Plaza. We were all told to be in a certain spot. People didn't know why they were told to be in certain spots, but it put them there.
I heard that one.
And then someone said, and they said, like, what they found out a couple of weeks before, that they were being set up, and they found out what was going to happen. And one of the guys on their team committed suicide because couldn't handle it.
Yeah.
And
that comes with
fascinating interview.
And that comes with the whole theory of CIA agents were changed out at the last minute. It's like, no, if they were changed out, they always knew they were supposed to be there, because you do have to practice that. That's a rehearsal. You don't just go in there. And I found Clint Hill, who was the agent who jumped up on the trunk of the car after that fatal shot, and the scalp goes back, and Jackie Kennedy's getting up on the car to grab what fragments. I couldn't imagine what was going through her head. And I would imagine, like, for me, when I see that, I think she's thinking, oh, just put it back, because that's someone you love, right? In shock. And as an empath, it kills me to watch it. I can't watch that loop over and over again. Clint Hill has so much trouble speaking about it because he feels so responsible. He said, they keep asking me, did you hear more than 2 shots? Some people heard 3 and 4 shots. And he says, I was on the back of the car. I heard the 2 shots. I ran up. I was on the car. I didn't hear anything after that.
Right.
So I think a lot of people that weren't in on it were perhaps as dumbfounded and probably used for that as well. Because if you're close enough to that trauma, chances are most people don't function well, regardless of your position in your career, whether you're CIA or not. They would have to go back through some kind of, wide awake hypnotherapy. Kind of like, I don't want to use Criminal Minds as a reference, but it's a BAU reference where they'll take you through in a quiet room, in a dark room, and take you through the moments. But now he's too old for that, if he's even still alive, with that kind of.
Right.
That's hard.
And they also know how people are going to react to being in a combat zone.
Yes.
So you have all these people there's a lot of people there with their kids.
Yes.
And all of a sudden you hear shots. Some people look over, they see the president's brain get knocked out of his head by a bullet, blown apart. People go into shock. The people who plan these things understand how people are going to react in those situations.
And it was
They're
perfect.
not going to know if there was 2 shots or 500 shots.
No.
Because they're going to be all like,
the last number was 4. Yes.
Yeah.
But on their sound bites, when they connected all the sound bites, there was 4 shots, but 2 were considered just handguns. Like, that could be, and you're in Texas, that could be anyone. But
that's all like, listen, the bottom line there is there were most likely 3 teams.
Yes, 3 shooters. I believe in that as well. I agree with you on that one. Not that I would disagree with you on anything, but I agree with that completely. I feel like they were brilliant. You're in a crowded place and families, and what happens? You hear shots and everybody scatters. Very easy to walk away.
Right. And
very easy to walk away. Everybody's running. Nobody stopped anyone to get any witnesses. Nobody. They just let them go. All the front lines were going because we got to take care of our president. And they know that.
And the assassins literally shot the grassy knoll, gives the weapon to another guy, which is a part of his team. He folds the gun up because it's foldable up, puts it in a thing. They walk. There's railroad tracks there. And Lee Bowers, one of the witnesses that said, I saw some weird stuff on the grassy knoll.
Yep.
And he dies a couple of years later in a weird car accident. There was a lot of that going on too. If you were a witness, if you were in the wrong place at the wrong time.
There was a lot of people on that overpass.
There were people on the overpass, but there were people, and again, you have this confusion that's created. But there was no one better at this at that time than the CIA, because this was modus operandi for them. They were doing this all over the world. They were putting together coups d'etats in all these countries in Central America, South America, Africa, because one of the things that Kennedy wanted, and people don't realize this, he wanted all nations to be sovereign. So all these third world countries, that whether it's South America, Central America, Africa, he wanted them to grow and have their sovereignty. Well, that's the one thing that the CIA didn't want, because the CIA made billions, and American companies and organizations and the very wealthy and powerful, right? These corporations, they made billions of dollars by exploiting these countries. They exploited their natural resources. They exploited them in terms of war. I mean, think about how much money was made in Vietnam and then Cambodia and
war games, as they say.
And there's still people dying from Vietnam.
War is profit, period. War is profit. And who gains the most in a war? Right? It's definitely not the young kids that are dying on battlefields, or the civilian casualties in Vietnam were over 1 million. So, but they were making money. The more bombs we dropped, the more money that General Dynamics and Bell Helicopter and all these other, big companies, organizations, and corporations, the biggest in the world. And then who owns stock in those? Think about who owns stock in those organizations, in those big corporations. It's all these elitist. Again, you go follow the money.
That's right.
Always.
That's right.
And that's why they wanted their Vietnam War. Kennedy was not going to give it to him. Lyndon Johnson was.
Yeah, I agree. So I want to back up again just a moment. We have these 3 teams. What was it about Lee Harvey Oswald specifically? He's just like low man on the totem pole? Was he just like, you know,
Lee
last
Harvey
one hired, first one to
Right.
go? Like what exactly? Why him out of everybody?
Lee Harvey Oswald was part of a false defector program that was run by William Harvey out of the CIA.
Okay.
That's when people say, well, he defected to Russia. He's a communist. Well, he was an intelligence agent. He was a spy. So it was a false defector program. They pretended to defect, but the whole time they were gathering intelligence for the United States.
Right.
So Oswald goes there. He meets Marina, marries her. He gets back into the country with hardly an interview. I mean, you don't do that. I mean, at the heart of the Cold War, you're not just saying, okay, come back. Right. He's come back with his Russian wife because she's a threat, you know, because she could be a Russian spy.
Oh, that could do it.
Yet they let him in the country because he was part of the program. Mm-hmm. So what they do is, and then there were, okay. Some people I've spoken to have talked about the fact that they planned what they had to cover their bases. Mm. So this assassination, there were 3 of them planned, and it depended on where things went the right way that it was going to occur in that city. One was Chicago, one was Tampa, and one was Dallas.
Right.
Okay. The one in Chicago, Kennedy was supposed to go through Chicago in a motorcade. The Secret Service got a telegram from a Lee, an informant, an inside informant by the name of Lee, telling them that there was going to be an assassination attempt where these Cuban nationalists, these exiles, wanted to kill Kennedy, and they were going to do it. They canceled the Chicago motorcade. That's Lee Harvey Oswald, because Lee Harvey Oswald was infiltrating these Cuban groups, and he had done it in New Orleans, and now he was doing it in Dallas. When he was told to go to Dallas, he was given a job at the Texas School Book Depository by his handler and put in that building for that purpose. So Oswald thinks he's meeting with these people from the Cuban community, and he's meeting people like, he knew Jack Ruby. He knew him. They knew each other from New Orleans because it was all the Marcello. There was that mob connection.
Right.
So he's doing his thing, and he's saying, okay, I'm infiltrating. I'm doing my job. I'm a good soldier, and I'm doing this. And so what winds up happening is, as this starts to take shape, they realize Dallas is going to work. It's Dallas. They had patsies lined up in Chicago and Tampa. It never happened. And if it would have happened in Chicago, we could be talking about a completely different person. Right. Three names. It wouldn't have been Lee Harvey Oswald. So Oswald happened to be at the wrong place, wrong time.
Would have had a vowel at the end of it.
And he was set up. He was sheep dipped. He was sheep dipped for a long time. Again, people have to understand the insidiousness of the CIA, especially back then, and the way they did things, the way they operated. They made sure, they knew if they were going to try something like this, it literally could not fail. They couldn't. There was too much at stake. So they had almost everything. And again, if there was a Zapruder film, well, then they'll just control the media and they'll make up ridiculous theories, and people will think that's the truth because of cognitive dissonance. So if there was that one mess up, that one thing they didn't consider, like the Zapruder film, they'll work around that.
They did, because Geraldo even put that on air, and that was a big deal as well years later.
Yeah.
But that was all Robert Grodin's fault, because he was the one who had the film in his hand, and he duplicated it without permission, and then he sold it.
Yeah, and then whatever wound up, Time magazine took that film, and it was a magazine, so why would they buy the film? They put it in their vaults, and they doctored it. So years later, when people are finally, there's a Zapruder film's coming out, and it's like, well, it kind of shows there's only so much you can doctor it. But it does cause confusion in the minds of people. It's like, well, was that shot from there? It seems like his head goes back into the left, but apparently the original film really shows is going back into the left.
Mm-hmm.
So it was definitely a
I was on
frontal
the
side
news
shot.
too. I think people, early days remember.
Yeah, Wayne said it.
Yeah. Early days, you remember the original, like as it was being captured live. Like, I mean, this was unfolding in front of people. And so to switch it almost seems like that Mandela effect. Did that really happen that way? Or did it happen this way?
Yeah.
Because then you're getting convinced that, no, this is how it happened.
Yeah.
Right?
This one was spliced.
Yeah. Which is.
This one was spliced because it had to match the Warren Commission's statement and findings. So they spliced the film and switched out 2 frames.
Right,
so it made it look like the shot came from the back, and inevitably it's Oswald.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I know a little bit.
No, that's what they had to do. So, and again, we'll never know. I tell people this. I was like, we'll probably never know the whole truth. But what we can do is know some of the things that it wasn't, right? That the magic bullet theory was nonsense. As critical thinkers, we have to hold their feet to the fire on that one.
That's a joke.
It's a joke.
Yeah.
Didn't they just release like 3,600 pages for review?
Highly redacted.
But here's exactly highly redacted. I mean, the only words you see are the, as,
and
I mean, it's
like
a
our
joke.
Government.
I mean, and again,
like
people
ours.
think, do you really think the CIA, even though it's 60 years has gone by, and people are like, well, those people are dead now. Alan Dulles is long.
Not
gone.
everybody.
So
here's the thing: the institutions are still there. So the CIA can't come out now and say, whoops.
Oh, 880 pages of a commission, Warren Commission. How are you going to say no?
Sorry.
Those 800 pages are all false.
We lied.
We wrote it to fit the narrative
because they'll give an excuse for it. It's the same thing with UFO disclosure. I tell people that what documents do you think you're really going to get?
Redacted.
They're all redacted, and they're not going to come out and say, well, yeah, we lied to you all those years, and we threatened people, and we killed people all those years. But everything's okay now.
Because now they're saying that they're not going to come out with disclosure. So they're getting a lot of resistance on that. But that's a whole other show we'll have you on for.
But you know what? Isn't it the same thing we're talking about? The same people who think they're better than everyone else, who think we can't handle truths, and that are trying to get away with whatever they're trying to get away with. Absolutely. And as American citizens, as Americans, we just keep getting screwed over. I mean, we're never told the truth, and we can't heal. I tell people this, and it's true. We can't heal as a nation from the Kennedy assassination. We haven't healed because the truth has never come out.
I haven't
and
healed
until it comes out, it's going to hang over this nation like a dark cloud.
Mm-hmm.
Right. It seems like the Kennedys have just been doomed from like starting from JFK. Then you have Robert Kennedy.
Well, who did they make the deal with? That's all I want to know.
Well, for sure. Absolutely. You know, one gets taken out. Again, are they all the same organizations? Like, is RFK, they'll say, oh, no, it was the mob. But were they not all working together in both cases?
Chappaquiddick was covered up.
Well, I think, RFK Jr. now has come out and says, which was good timing for the book. Yeah. But he's a courageous dude. He tells it like it is. And he said, listen, the CIA was involved in my uncle and my father's assassination.
Absolutely.
And guess what? He's right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I know. So, see, it's just like everything. This family just can't seem to
stay away from politics.
I know.
It's like everybody in the Kennedy family should retire from politics and they'll live longer.
Had a real good go of it. That's all.
I'm worried about them.
A lot of tragedy, but think about it. They were a major threat to these people.
Yes.
JFK and Robert, because the people loved them.
But they used a lot of people too.
They did want to change things.
Yes,
and they were, like I said, they weren't perfect. But at the end, I say JFK was our last best chance for world peace, because since he died, we haven't even been close to it. It's been perpetual war and conflict.
You were not wrong with that. He reminds me a little bit about, and I think it was mentioned somewhere in the stream, like Lincoln. People looked at Lincoln with hope. And I think people looked at JFK with hope. This is something new, you know? And then look at how that turned out. It's just like, so not only are they proving a point by saying, look, we took out this guy who, you know, America loved, but in a way showing that, no, he's not untouchable. But it's like crushing the hope of the people as well.
Correct. It's psychological. And think about Lincoln being killed when he was killed. It changed, you know, Reconstruction.
Yeah.
And things were worse for the freed slaves than they were when they were slaves. I mean, because then the Ku Klux Klan was running wild. You had the Jim Crow laws. That it turned into a disaster, which is what we're still feeling today as a country, because things went wrong in Reconstruction. If Lincoln would have lived and been able to maybe finish that term, right? And because after him was all corruption, right? It was Andrew Johnson instead of Lyndon Johnson. That's weird.
Right. They're not going to kill the corrupt ones. Yeah. They don't kill the corrupt ones. They take the good ones before they can do anything.
They have to take the ones that are, you know, Gandhi was assassinated too. People forget.
Yes.
He didn't die of old age.
No.
You know, Martin Luther King.
Well, he wanted peace. What's wrong with them?
Yeah, because people
they want peace. You know, I'm being sarcastic.
Humans, honestly, I've come to the conclusion, and I know this is terrible, but human beings are just awful. I have very little faith in our future, and I hate to say it, but unless we evolve, like we're talking about, I mean, really evolve, then and reach that next stage of our quote unquote evolution, or evolutionary journey to become galactic citizens. We talk about this with the documentaries all the time. If I were an ET and I was looking down here, I'd be like running for the hills. I'd be
like, don't go to the bad neighborhood. Keep going.
To do with these people.
I know.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah. They don't play well in the sandbox. Keep going.
Yeah. But then there are some of us who really do want to be better. And I think it's so hard to live in a world where we're seeing this, and it's like, why? This is wrong. And it's almost like the bad guys always win.
We're living in a world where I believe, and I feel for myself, that the less time you spend on social media, the more time you can grow. And we're living in a world where everybody just wants to be in front of a camera and say, look at me, look what I'm doing, instead of doing something. When we were kids, I know we did a lot of volunteer work as kids. I'm sure you did as well. Not because the school told us, because that's the way we were raised. So I find that it's just a different generation. It's and my nieces hear this from me, even though they're closer to my age, but I say it's more, there's self-entitlement. There is no feeling of the other person and how can I help my neighbor? Neighbors don't exist anymore.
You're disconnected.
You're very disconnected.
You're talking head. People pour their lives out in for the world to see. Collector of information. You're giving
and that's exactly what these elitists want.
Yeah.
They want distraction. They want people to be just zombified. You think about it. It's just becoming a zombie.
I think everyone needs to watch Snowden once or twice a year just to remind yourself of what it's really like out there. I don't feel he has any reason to lie about what he did. He had to uproot his life and move across the world to Russia so that he won't be assassinated.
And he talked about it, and he had the courage, like Kennedy did. I'm surprised he lived, but you know, they discredited him to the point where most people, I would think in this country, you know how it works. They're he's a traitor.
Yeah, but I think Russia will. I think Russia will protect him for a long time, just to
upset us.
To piss off. Yeah.
We're going to take a quick minute for a station and sponsor ID.
Oh my goodness!
And then
water.
We'll pick up where we left off.
Yes, this is where you can really tell when I'm tired. Sorry, that's bad. I'm so into this. I don't want to stop. But
you could
I
talk about
have
it
to.
forever. It's
I have to
great stuff.
because without them, there's no show.
I know.
No show. So you are listening to The Outer Realm with Michelle DeRoche and Amelia Pisano, coming to you live from the beautiful city of New Orleans on 107.7 FM, as well as the Gulf Coast on 105.3 FM. We are live on all YouTube channels, all of our group Facebook channels, and not only live, but archived as well on Roku channel. Our guest tonight is Jack Roth, and let me get the full title of the book because, oh my God, this is so exciting.
Look up.
Yeah, like so amazing.
You're welcome.
It's Christmas. Thank you, Michelle. It's the best gift ever. But if Jack doesn't come back, I'm going to be really upset. His book tonight we're discussing is Killing Kennedy, Exposing the Plot, the Cover-Up, and the Consequences. If you're just tuning in, don't worry. You can stream us on our archives on any platform that you normally use. Simply search United Public Radio and then The Outer Realm to find us. Remember to click like and subscribe. Add us to your playlist so you never miss an episode, and kindly share us with your friends and family. I'll say that 100 times. Kindly share us. Folgers Coffee, we give you a huge, we're sending out lots of love. Thank you so much for your continued support and sponsoring our show. We absolutely love you. We appreciate you since day one, and we hope that it's a long-going relationship with you. Thank you. Our fabulous banner and promo media is courtesy of Steve McGinnis. He's a horror illustrator, an incredible artist, and Steve creates commission pieces in any genre as well. So you can find him on Facebook. Thank you, Steve. Our intro and outro is courtesy of Dr. Snick, the sonic surgeon, aka Justin Snicker, award-winning composer, vocalist, and musician. You can find his music on Amazon and Bandcamp, stream on any platform, and you can find Dr. Snick on Facebook and Instagram and in your stories as well. Just search Dr. Snick when you're putting a story together and pick out his music. It's really cool. He's always dropping those videos. You know, I tell you guys this every time we're on air. His videos are little horror, but they're creepy cool. So check them out. Thank you, Justin. Lastly, kindly give us a like, subscribe, and share with your friends and family, especially if you're watching YouTube right now and you're on our YouTube or on UFO Paranormal YouTube. Hit that like and subscribe button. If you're on our Facebook channels, please hit that like button.
There we go, and we are back. Okay, quick question. So what happened to, because they obviously seem to be taking out everybody who is a witness who they may feel could come back at them in the future. And considering with Lee Harvey Oswald, they were threatening his wife and children. Did anything ever happen to his wife and children that you're aware of? Or did they go on to live, happy lives, or
Well, they went on to live, and with Marina Oswald, his wife, the FBI or the Secret Service, they took her, and I think I don't know what they did to her, but by the time they had her talk to the public and be interviewed for the first time, she looked like a zombie, and she was like, it was prepared. Her answers were prepared. She condemned her husband, and at first when it happened, she was not condemning her. They said, listen, and plus she was Russian, so who knows what they were telling her, what they would do to her. And then she had two small children, and those two children have grown up. And the one thing I regret about this particular book is that I didn't get one of them in it. I have some cool stories about Marina from other people who have talked to her and over the years. But the two girls, they've had to live their entire lives with their father being the most hated man in history, right? According to a lot of people, right? He was they're the assassin's daughters.
Did they have to change their names just to?
No, they didn't. But
Good for them.
They get married. I'm not sure exactly. Like, they're both alive.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about doing a volume 2 of this, but that would be my big get on that. I would love to interview one of them. because and it would be, they were so young. It's not like they're going to tell me anything about what happened then, but they can tell me about what their lives have been like.
Right.
Because there's collateral damage.
Yes.
And that's the thing we have to realize. And the biggest injustice of this whole thing, if Lee Harvey Oswald was indeed a patsy, and I totally 100% believe he was, and I just ask people to do their own research, read, do their thing. Don't take my word for it, but do it. And when you realize he was a patsy, that was the biggest injustice to all of this, is the smearing of his name and his legacy, and his wife and his children have had to deal with this their whole lives, and especially the children. And it's wrong. It's wrong. And the only way we truly get past this, he needs to be exonerated. The truth needs to come out, and he needs to be exonerated. People need to come and they say, he didn't do it.
But who has the power to do that? I mean, the Kennedys, you can't look at anything without their permission. And then you've got the CIA that's not going to give you anything.
There's no one can
on
do
this.
It. The people that did it could have done it, but the CIA now, again, the CIA could come out now in some of these redacted documents and say, Oswald was one of ours. He was there, but it was a conspiracy. And there were other shooters. Now, would they say he was one of the shooters? Maybe. To keep it so it's not, but maybe that'll help their lie a little bit to say, well, he was one of them. So there were just others, because it was a conspiracy.
They didn't even check him for GSR.
It'll never happen.
No, they just arrested him. They didn't check him for GSR. They just arrested him and named him because they needed answers fast, and the ones that weren't a part of it.
There were things about him that were in the papers so fast that they knew it before it happened.
Yeah.
So how are they getting this? The CIA is feeding the mainstream media information about Lee Harvey Oswald before the actual assassination occurs.
Yeah.
So that, and they're putting it all out there.
Like a politician or a celebrity, often media has their obits ready to go, where they just fill in the missing pieces from the year before in case they pass away. They did the same thing with him.
Well, they literally
had it ready
because they painted this guy.
Exactly.
And that was Hoover. Hoover said, we have to convince the world it was Oswald.
I have mixed feelings about that man. Yeah.
If we don't, we could be looking at World War III.
A friend of mine is his nephew.
Yeah, J. Edgar Hoover was a terrible person too.
Yes. Yeah. So was this man's grandfather. He's the great-great-grandson of Henry H. Holmes.
No way.
Yes. And I believe it's his uncle that was J. Edgar Hoover.
Wow.
Yeah. He's a friend of ours.
Actually, that's a shock.
Into the
Are we talking about the serial killer here?
Yes. And the way he's American Ripper. I don't know if you saw the show. The way you talked about writing about these girls and the aftermath, he found out who his great-great-grandfather was when he turned 40. His grandfather talked about him. He never knew his whole life. He was a well-established attorney who worked really well, great reputation, had done some time in the Navy, took 10 years off to research this because he wrote about how he dealt with it. Not who he was, but how do I deal with knowing that this is my relative killed hundreds of people? And and he's also related to Hoover. Yeah.
Guilty by association. I mean, it's something
also related to that guy for
who your family is, but
some tree,
treaty.
Was it pine tree, Bruce tree? What is it called? In the States, there's a treaty that was also his relative. Yeah, he's quite interesting. But I'm saying that I think you should write that book. I hope you have the opportunity to do that because I know it gave Jeff a lot of healing, and I believe you'd be able to help his daughters heal with that.
Yeah, they don't like to talk, but as you can imagine.
Yeah.
But they don't like to do like video interviews.
That's okay.
But if I'm writing a book,
and you're showing compassion.
and they could read this book, they know I'm compassionate, that I'm not making people, I'm not interviewing people to make them look bad. I'm interviewing people to get their stories and share it with others. That's why I wrote the book. And so I'm not doing this to, I want to just get the record out there, get these stories out there because they're important. And if we can understand what one of these girls went through her entire life just because of who her dad was, then I think you start to understand the collateral damage we're talking about here.
Well, there's families associated, with these people. There's this, it rolls downhill, at the end of the day, and people have to pick up the pieces. Did you run into any problems when you wrote the book with the research that you've done when it comes to, I always say the good old boys club, like the scholars and people of academia who are just like, no, this is how it was. This is how we researched it. This is what we looked into. Has it been well received on average, or have you gotten any resistance?
I haven't gotten too much resistance. Now,
very nice.
It's the kind of thing where I just wanted to do my part right. So in other words, I knew if I created a book, and that's why I did it the way I did it. I did it so that, again, every chapter I interviewed someone. I let their words do the talking. I let their stories do the talking. So it's journalism 101, really. And it's just asking the right questions.
Right.
And then boiling it down. And so there's not much to criticize because I'm not coming out and saying, I know for sure that this happened. I wanted to avoid that because I'm not one of these people who spent 30 years. I'm not going to start that deep dive at this point.
Yeah.
I just wanted to be more like a people's history, so people can go to this book and reference it. And if they wanted to read one chapter, they can read 1 or 2 chapters, and then they can come back and read 3 more. And then if a certain chapter really interests them, the topic, then they can I'm going to get this book and this book and this book. I want to learn more about who Oswald really was, or I want to learn more about the CIA, E. Howard Hunt, because I interviewed St. John Hunt, who's the son of E. Howard Hunt of Watergate fame, or infamy, I should say, one of the Watergate burglars. But a lot of the people who were the Watergate burglars, they were the same guys in Dallas that day in '63.
Wow.
It was all the usual suspects.
Yeah.
And the names they're the same names. Frank Sturgis.
What, no middle name?
Well, E. Howard Hunt.
Yes.
He was he says on his quote unquote deathbed confession that he was asked, he was more logistics on the outside guy. So what he did, he got some of the people in through Canada, some of the assassins from Europe, the Corsican mob, through Canada and into Texas, and different ways to get people in and out. He had to put them in safe houses after. That's what E. Howard Hunt did. So he used that was his thing. It was logistics. And he did this he worked with the Cuban exiles for years. And the Bay of Pigs was one of his things. So they were trying to overthrow Castro forever. From the minute Castro got in the power, the CIA, they were trying to dethrone him, so to speak, kill him any way they could. And so that's what they were doing. And they were unsuccessful with Castro, which was amazing. That was a big loss for them in the end.
And there's too many people on the inside on both sides with that. I love that you wrote this book. Do we have anybody that we need to, because I talked so much, we missed a lot of comments and things, Michelle. I know she's giving my moment in glory here because I'm just like fangirling, but I'm so happy that you wrote this book and why you wrote it. I'm honored to be here speaking with you, and I love your compassion with this book, and I love how thorough you were and how kind you were and careful.
I appreciate that. I really do.
Thank you. Oh, Christopher. Christopher A. James, thank you so much for participating. Are any of you familiar with my most favorite comic, Bill Hicks? If not, please do yourself the favor and watch the YouTube clip of his genius comedic explanation of the assassination of JFK, Back and to the Left. And of course, I'm planning on voting for RFK Jr. Okay. Thank you.
Bill Hicks was he ruffled feathers. He was
Did he?
brilliant.
I don't know
Yeah,
who he is.
he was a courageous comedian. Died young, very young.
Almost like a George Carlin type.
Well, he would tell it like it is. I mean, he didn't
Yeah.
care, you know, and he had some really great takes on stuff like that, on the Kennedy assassination. And he didn't hold back. You know,
Yeah.
and again, you put yourself out there. You never know what's going to happen, but you do it anyway because you have to.
Exactly.
So, you know, but Bill Hicks was funny.
Wow.
Another comment?
Polly, thank you for joining us, Polly. Might I tell you, you're very pretty. See your picture there. My father knew about the Bay of Pigs, and we were part of the John Birch Society. I was a junior member.
Whoa.
Interesting.
Okay. John Birch Society.
Johnson was part of it too.
Yeah. Well, Johnson, I you know, we didn't talk about Johnson. One of the chapters, I interviewed this guy who spent a lot of years researching Lyndon Johnson, and he was definitely part of the cover up. He knew about it because it was all the Texas oligarchy. It was all his Texas oil friends. Right. Texas was the most corrupt state. Well, maybe Louisiana, but Texas. Ooh, you want to talk about a good old boy network? They were so corrupt down there, it was ridiculous. And the Kennedys were ready to get rid of him. They were ready to put him up on charges. They didn't want him to run again, to have him be the VP. And he was so dirty, Lyndon Johnson. And you got it. It's not enough time to tell about it, but about everything he was about. But one thing for certain, you want to talk about psychological traits. He was all of those. He was a narcissist. He was a sociopath. He was a psychopath. He was a megalomaniac. All these things. And there's Dan. I wanted to do a shout out to Dan.
How you know Dan?
Buddy? Yeah,
he's been on our show a couple times. I was going to say, do you know who his grandfather is?
Yeah. Jesse James. Dan's awesome. H.L. Hunt. And here's the thing about Dan, and you should get him on to talk about this.
He's been on.
And I know he's been on.
Oh, I'm sorry.
He had to deal with a lot of these Texas people in his research, right? So he's telling me about H.L. Hunt. Hello, Dan. and he, you know, all these, like he met one of Lyndon Johnson's cronies. Who was it? Billy Solestis, who was the crookedest, the most horrible human being. But he met him at some funeral, and they're all very interested. Yeah, it does hit home because they're all incredibly interested in Dan's family story, and it makes you wonder how far does this go? What do these people know? You know, you talk about the John Birch Society. Boy, I'll tell you what, that is the conservative think tank of all time. That is an uber conservative. You look at who's in the John Birch Society over the course of its history, and that's a little scary. So, but again, this is all related.
Right. It's sort of scary when you think about it, just how deep the rabbit hole goes and just how long it's been going on for and how long it will continue to go on for. Comment from Wayne.
Hi,
this
Wayne.
Was funny, actually. That's true.
He writes, in the normal world, once you reach a certain age, you need to leave your job because you're not as together as you were in your years. But with the president, you need to be a fossil to get elected.
Look at his photo.
And apparently have dementia.
Hilarious House of Frightenstein, yeah.
Like Methuselah.
He's a writer. He's an incredible writer.
That's so funny.
There we go. Another one.
Yes.
No, Heather.
Heather, it's always such a pleasure listening to Jack Roth. He's so knowledgeable and really makes you think outside the box. Yeah, well, definitely.
You, and I love your photo there of Breaking Bad.
Oh my goodness.
Always nice. We have the best audience.
Yeah, go ahead, Amelia.
No, I've got nothing. I was like,
I've got nothing.
I got nothing.
Well,
nothing, honey.
No. So, what's next for Jack Roth? I think you should do a film about this and interview these people if they'd be willing to. I think it would be outstanding.
No kidding.
Someone who's my publicist, I call her my publicist. She's awesome, Stacy. She's been helping me get on shows like this and helping me promote the book. She thinks it would be a great either documentary or even like a doc series. And I never thought of it that way.
Mm.
I guess you could do the interviews, and it would definitely be a great documentary, because it's definitely a certain approach to it.
Mm-hmm.
And I can get enough of the people who were in it to interview. It would be a really good documentary. And as far as Kennedy goes, like I said, sales have been pretty good. Publisher I have a really good relationship with. There could be a volume 2.
I hope so.
Because there are enough people. I could easily interview 20 to 25 more people, and it would all be very compelling interviews. I'd take it even further. And like I said, if I can get one or both of Lee Harvey Oswald's daughters, I think that would be a major coup for me. And for the book, because I think that would be incredibly insightful. All I wanted for this book was that it was insightful, and that there were things that people didn't know about that would come out because of these people's stories. And that's all I could ask for, and that it would be readable and compelling and put together well. And I think I accomplished that. But I would definitely do a volume 2. But as you know, we have some documentary projects also coming down the line that we're trying to put together and develop, as well as a screenplay. So, but I know I'm coming back on the show. I think we're going to talk about UFOs. I'm not sure. But,
you are, and if you're not, you will be.
No, yeah.
That's Michelle's favorite.
I think we have it set up for next month.
Did John Kennedy go on a UFO?
People ask me that.
Coming back March 20th. That's right.
March 20th. People ask me.
The day after my birthday. Another gift.
They say, did John Kennedy die? Was he killed because of what he knew about UFOs? And I never put the two. Like, this
I've
was
heard that one
thing.
from one of our guests, I think, said it.
And I think, here's what I think, and that I think it's safe to say, is that presidents since the 1940s, since Roswell, let's say right after World War II, which is the modern era of UFOs.
Right.
After we dropped the bomb, I think
everything changed after Roswell.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think that presidents, some knew more than others. Eisenhower, I think, knew a lot. And the incomings are always like, what do you know? What do you know? I want to know. And depending on who you are, I think someone like George Bush Sr., because he was the head of the CIA, knew an awful lot about the UFO phenomena and the cover up and everything.
Yes.
But I think a lot of presidents just want to know more.
Nixon
and because they think they have the power, but they don't have that top secret clearance, believe it or not.
No.
These things are so top secret and so just the dark projects that the president, they'll tell the president, it's need to know. You don't need to know.
He's a temporary employee of the government. He's a temporary employee.
Yeah, and he doesn't have the power. Yes, he has this perceived power, and there's power in vetoes, and there's power in some of the things he can do or she can do. Hopefully there'll be a she soon. But when you think about the true power structure of this country and the world, president, not as high as you would think. They always say he's the most powerful person in the free world. No, he's not. He's
a figurehead. That's all.
He's a figurehead. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
so
true.
That's what I think. I think that Kennedy may have wanted to know more, and maybe Doug, but they're not going to kill a president for that. But
and you had more Republican presidents knew about it. Nixon knew a lot. He brought Jackie Gleason to have a look-see.
One of the coolest stories ever, by the way.
It is, because it messed up Jackie Gleason for frickin' ever. After that, he was never the same.
He just started to drink even more.
I know.
Yeah, I would too.
I know. But he said, he said, if people really knew what was going on and what was out there, like he cried apparently after he had that experience.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard for someone who lives a life. No, it's not. Unless you work your way towards it. We've worked our way towards it.
Yes.
We understand the possibilities. We've done the research. We've talked about it. But imagine someone who lives a very old-fashioned, I say old-fashioned, but, older generation, black and white, no nonsense, very practical, right? If science can't prove it, it doesn't exist. There's no such thing as ghosts. There's no such thing as UFOs. There's no such thing.
A documentary called "There's No Such Thing as Ghosts."
I mean, there's people that are very much like that. But imagine that person.
Yes. Yeah.
Now, all of a sudden, seeing an ET body in a tank in Homestead Air Force Base.
So that's a hard.
It makes me cry when I see those photos. So
yeah, but people can't. and people can barely get through everyday life and dealing with the obstacles that you have no choice to deal with. It's hard for people to get, well, especially people of that time, to get their head around something so like far out there. Now I think because we have computers, we have the internet, everybody's got a cell phone, people are becoming a little bit more relaxed about it. Let's face it, ancient people, they were all way ahead of the game. And then Roswell changed everything. It's like, no, you're not allowed to talk about this now. This is a secret technology. Now this is taboo. And people feared it because, again, you're being conditioned to think a certain way. But the United States is the last country to bloody disclose. Half
That's
the
really
world
sad.
is like they're all in
It's
on
sad.
it.
Yeah.
Right?
Maybe they have more to hide, though. I think about that all the time.
Yeah.
Maybe they have more to
culpable.
hide.
They're more culpable.
Yeah, that too.
Didn't Kennedy push for disclosure? Good question.
Yeah, he was one of those guys. I mean, he was definitely one of those people who were like, hey, we need to know. He wanted to. He was not afraid of that stuff. He wanted people to know stuff, that things shouldn't be hidden from people.
Mm-hmm.
He railed against secret societies, right? In one of his last speeches, he says these secret societies, and what he was talking about was these blue blood elites.
He would have hated Bush.
Let me tell you something. George Bush Sr. was in Texas that day. And that's a whole other thing. But the Bush, because he was in the big oil, CIA.
Yes.
He was the head of CIA.
Yes, he would be in Texas. That's right.
But he would not at that point. He wasn't head of CIA, but he was in the CIA.
Maybe that's what got him the head. Huh? We need to look at the timing on that.
You do certain things, and you play ball, and you're a shill, right? And you just obey orders and do what you're supposed to do. There's no more of a perfect example of one of these blue blood elitist families than the Bushes. And they all did. Skull and Bones is a secret society. It's a real one. It's a real thing.
Junior's in that.
Goes back hundreds of years. The amount of power the people who are in Skull and Bones have had over the years in this country is horrifying. Because they keep the power contained within themselves. That's why they didn't want this upstart Kennedy Catholic dude coming in. No. They didn't want any part of that. They always want. Why do you think it's taken so long? You would think we would have had a female president by now, another Catholic president by now, a Jewish president by now.
Not a good old boy.
We had Barack Obama, but I tell people this story real quick. He remember, like say, Barack Obama won, so he wins the election. There's all this, everyone's excited, a new day is dawned, because we were so tired of the Bushes. So he comes in, he's all excited. He has, everything he ran on for his campaign. They have that transition meeting where he meets with the Bush people, and they have the transition meeting in the White House somewhere. And I remember I happened to be watching TV that day, and I saw that they're doing the transition meeting. I'm like, okay. So you see Obama in the days before, he had just won the election. He's this young guy, right? He has vibrant and all that. He goes into this transition meeting. 4 hours later, he comes out and they show him. And I'm telling you, I asked people to try to find this footage. I don't know how to find it. He had gray hair that he didn't have going into it. He looked shaken.
Really?
Shaken to the core.
What did they tell him?
And I was like, something happened in there. And I joke about this, but I think they show the Zapruder film. I honestly think they show the Zapruder film and say, that too could be you if you don't do what we tell you to do.
Do you think they pushed him through a dimension and brought him back?
Well, I don't know about that, but they scared him. They basically lay down the law and say, you're president, but you're not going to do anything we don't want you to do.
Hey, he's one of the most quickly to age presidents that I've ever seen.
This was a 3-hour age.
That's shocking. I didn't know about that.
It was like Moses going up to the burning bush and coming down with long gray hair. I mean, it was ridiculous. I'm like, he was shaken. He's just, how confident he was, and how when he was confident,
he was suave and charming. I think that was something they hadn't seen in a long time as well.
And then he recovered from the meeting, obviously, but in that meeting, something happened.
Yeah, I have mixed feelings about it. Can I read Wayne's comment about Barack?
Which one? Let's start with this one.
Okay.
We'll
yes. I didn't see that one. Okay, thank you.
Cool.
Wayne says JFK was interested in opening up communication with all other countries to discuss alien encounters and sharing collected tech with each other. That didn't go over with the higher ups.
Just saying.
And then Wayne says Barack Obama said after his meeting in transition meeting, he said if there were windows in that room, he would have jumped out of that window.
There you go, Wayne. Thank you for that, because I'm telling you, I saw it, and that confirms it. I feel like that I not see that, but I did see it. Something happened.
Right.
Now I want to look for that clip.
Try to find it. You could. It'd be hard to find.
I would imagine. Probably have to go into a dark web to get that.
Because it was random. It's like, okay, he comes out of the transition meeting and they interview him. It was like one of those,
Well, if I ever see it, I'm going to think of you and I'm going to zoom in on that. Like really focus in on that.
No,
that's very interesting.
Wayne's right. I didn't know that he said that, but that tells you.
See it for sure.
He was very careful with his words.
Your websites. Tell everybody how to find you, what you've got coming up. This is promote time.
Okay, sure. Well, I have an author site, and people ask, well, what's the easiest way to get the book? There's two ways. You can go to jackrothauthor.com.
Right.
And on there, there's a link to, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all the major booksellers. And there's my other stuff that I'm working on or have worked on is there with links to that, the documentaries, other books. And then, of course, you can just go straight to Amazon to buy the book. That's also obviously an easy way. If you go to my site, there's more information, and it's pretty cool. I have a recommended reading list that's pretty extensive too.
You're also in Indigo Chapters in Canada.
What's that?
Indigo Chapters Indigo. It's like an umbrella of Barnes and Nobles in Canada.
Oh,
your book is there.
I love it. I love knowing that people from other countries read this, because they also have a much different perspective than we do. Like I said, the Europeans knew all along it was a conspiracy. From the day it happened, they were like, conspiracy. Obvious conspiracy, and they looked at us like we were children. Like, what is wrong with them? Right. So I want people from hopefully that around the world are reading it. So
I love it. I'm so happy you're here tonight.
Yes, my gosh, thank you for joining us. And Amelia is just totally
fangirling.
Send me.
I just want to listen.
Send me a mailing address and I'll send you some.
Well, thank you. You don't have to do that, but thank you so much.
That's my pleasure.
Too generous.
You've been so kind about.
No, are you kidding me?
About the book, so
and I'm not one to lend out my books. My family and friends know that. I make them buy their own books. Like, I don't lend them. If they say, "Oh, can I borrow the book?" I'm like, "No,
never lend out. You have to buy it." I learned that the hard way.
No, I do it because I want. No, it's not because of
Right.
that. I do it because I want the author to get that recognition on the sales. That's why I do it.
Oh, yeah,
I don't do it for any other reason. I have an extensive book collection. I collect old leather bound and hand sewn books as well. So,
I've done that with other authors. They're like, why not just trade books? Like, well, why don't we just buy each other's books? And it helps. It helps with sales numbers.
That's why I never lend my books.
And leave a review, people.
Yes, reviews are so important.
Yes, exactly. Well, Jack, thank you. I will be in touch, and because I have a couple of ideas, so I'm going to be in touch with you, and I will send you links and so on.
Yay!
Thank you both. Thanks for having me on.
I look forward to you the day after my birthday.
Pleasure.
Very cool.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night. Have a great weekend.
All right, you too, guys. Take care.
Bye.
You're welcome. Good night.
Good night.
Well, that was the end of another fantastic segment and totally out of the norm. And wow, that's all I'm going to say. Wow. Very well researched. I love these interviewed all these people, and be interesting to see if people are still a little bit on edge about talking about it, even all these years, because it was such a monumental event in American history, world history, really. But Anyway, big thank you to Jack Roth for joining us tonight and spending the evening with us and talking about his book, Killing Kennedy, exposing the plot, the cover-up, and the consequences. I love it. Yeah. Big thank you to Folgers Coffee for sponsoring the show this evening and every other evening. Big thank you to Dr. Snick, the sonic surgeon. Big thank you to Steve McGinnis for all of his artwork. And next week, guys, we're going to have 2 new people. So Les Durant is going to be on Wednesday night. He is an accomplished ghost and UFO hunter.
Mm-hmm.
I know. But he seems to have found a method of recording extraterrestrials. And he's got over 40 recordings. He's been on different shows and he's got stuff all over YouTube to go check it out. And Thursday night brings another special guest, Joshua Shapiro, who does all kinds of amazing stuff. Honestly, he does amazing stuff. But we're going to be starting off, and again, he's going to be on at least a couple times. I'd like to see him come more than that, but he's going to be discussing crystal skulls. And that's I love talking about crystal skulls. I think we've only had one person who's ever really come on and really gotten into it. So this is going to be really cool. So again, guys, you're listening to The Outer Realm, United Public Radio Network, UFO Paranormal Radio Network, 105.3, 107.7. Have a good weekend, and we'll see you all next week. Thanks to everybody who tuned to the chat room. You make it that much more fun. Good night.